At some point in time, JFK or Richard Nixon or one of them decides that if a helicopter lands at the White House, then and if they put on the side Air Force One or something, and it actually began as a paramilitary group called Air Force One, and actually possibly even a radio show, the Air Force One radio show, where they would talk about different sites or different things that were going on. And basically, like I said, they started renting the White House. That's how it really started. They rented the White House, and then they rented the D.C. building. And mostly because the White House and the D.C. building actually had gold on site, pretty much. And then, mostly it just has more to do with me than anything else. And anyway, like I don't really care, but basically, you know, basically where, pretty much, at one point in time, the United States of America actually had two presidents. One president in somewhere on this side, and one president over on the New York side, where, depending on where you were or what state you were in, you believed that this guy was president or that guy was president. This happened mostly probably in the 1920s and 1940s, but where basically your broadcast or who you thought was president actually had more to do with what city or state you were in and what was on TV than anything else. Where the public actually finally agreed, or the United States finally agreed, that if an aircraft lands at the White House, then he's the president of the United States of America. And pretty much that's all that basically there is as far as the government. The helicopter that lands carrying the person that is the president at the White House is the president of the United States. And that's what Nixon was going for. Because there was a lot of questions about who the president is going around. Anyway, from 1930 to 1940, nobody knew who was president of the United States. There were five of them, guys with suits and ear things, and nobody really knew who the president was. Nobody even knew if they voted for them. They saw a name on a ballot, but is that really the person? They see a name Trump or JF or Kennedy, but who is really Kennedy? Is that the person they see on TV? And depending on which state, you might actually have seen a different Kennedy. Anyway, between 1910 or 1930 and 1960, it depended on which news state, who owned this news station of the city that you were in. Where eventually around 1950, 1960, they agreed that whose helicopter or who landed at the White House has got to be the President of the United States. So let's see who lands there. That was Nixon, or whatever. And he made sure somebody that was with him landed at the White House. And they just landed, and then people told him to go away. That he didn't live here. What were they doing landing their helicopter at that site, at that house? And they took off and flew away. But they used that as, clearly this is what's his name exiting from the helicopter right here. Yes, clearly he's what's called, and you can see some guys walking up that were real Secret Service, trying to find out why he was landing. Well, nobody could enter the airspace of the White House unless they express permission. Anyway, what really happened, and what the public thought was happening, were often two different things. And that actually is my White House, like I say. And this will become fairly obvious, and basically, like I said, I am real Lucifer, and had to take care of a few things before I could even be on this planet as anything. And there's massive epic war and World War I, World War II as I basically became Brian, or was Brian. As people found out the truth of everything and started actually digging and looking into things and seeing how safe the world actually was. And mostly women cared more than anything because they were tired of being raped. And basically having a gun shoved in their face. 24/7. Like, oh, here comes those guys again. Basically women, it was literally like when you step outside in some places, like you will get raped on the way from your house to school, and then you will get raped on your way from work to home, and you will be raped as soon as you park your car in the garage. Who rapes you is dependent on how hard how hard you kick, and whether or not you can keep them off of you, and how many people are with him. He might have 20 guys with him. He might only have 3 guys. He might be one person that just says, "Can I?" And then, boom, and then, oof, 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 yeah. Depending on which city you're in, and that depended on your combat skills and your ability to overpower someone that is bigger than you and taller than you or whatever. And that's dependent on whether or not anyone actually cares enough to actually help you. Usually your coworkers, which may or may not be shot by somebody hiding in what's called waiting for someone to come up, and then the guy looks over and goes, see what you get. Or something like that. Anyway, and this happens through LA and everywhere else in the world. And basically women had no safety whatsoever. Not even a little bit. It was more of how many times you got raped in your lifetime. And that is where I came in. Women were very upset about how things were. And I had the capability of fixing it. So I helped them out a little bit. So anyway, it's a very unfortunate thing. Mostly certain groups more than others. Like I say, there's a lot of very disturbing facts about what was going on in the world. And there was no possibility of, there was no law, there was no nothing. And even some streets were basically like, well, because people would just walk down the street and go, oh, I like the house. And depending on the streets, the police department might care, they might not care. Not just in America. I mean, this happened in America too, or the United States too. Happened all over the world. That's why my bases and why I was more protected than anyone else, because I actually had Auschwitz and a bunch of other bases and a lot of people between me, or my people, and the outside world. Anyway, and mostly people don't mess with me, and I don't actually see it because they know who I am. And I'm being watched by 800 galaxies. Not too closely, apparently. Anyway, but I am living, and I did make it to the ripe old age of 41 so far, which is better than most things, because considering Pops and Blacks and the Crips planned to rape me and everyone else I ever knew. Of course, I think they thought I was a woman. They might have been very upset when they found out I was actually a guy. Anyway, yeah. So there was a lot of issues with the world. And forget tourism. Actually, that was probably the biggest thing, is that they realized that they didn't have to kill people. They could just have tourism companies and make money off the tourism. And then it also increased their chances of who would rape. Like, they got tired of raping the same people, the same women over and over again. It's like they leave on planes and then they go away and they don't come back. And that's just fine with us, Anton would say. And they would dress up in nice suits and go down stage streets and say, I wonder who I will rape tonight. Anton would say this, a black guy. I wonder who I will rape tonight in my private city. Some black guy named Anton that spoke French or had a French. It took him years before. I mean, he was 40 years old before he finally learned French, basically while raping a woman. Anyway. And then he would get his suit on, his nicest suit that he could buy and afford, and he would go down to the street and see who he would rape today. That's pretty much black culture. Anyway, Anton.